Good morning. Today's video is on hypothesis. My previous videos were on research, definition and types, qualitative and quantitative research differences, research paradigms, and research variables. I feel it is good to discuss hypothesis next. That's why I have chosen it. As it is very extensive, I have decided to deal it in two parts. The word hypothesis is made up of two words, hypo, less than, and thesis. Thesis, you know. So it is less than a thesis. It is a reasonable guess based upon available evidences the researcher seeks to test in his or her study. So the word hypothesis, the spelling hypothesis is singular and hypotheses is plural. Most of the time, errors are made with regard to this aspect. If only one hypothesis, we have to use singular one, hypothesis, THESIS, and more than one hypothesis, you have to use the term THESES, HYPOTHESES. Coming into what is hypothesis? Hypothesis is an assumption that is made based on some evidence. This is the initial point of any investigation that translates the research questions into predictions. So the research questions are translated to predictions. So hypotheses are predictions about the variables. Prediction about the relationship between two or more variables. Hypothesis translates a research question into a precise prediction of expected outcomes. Precise, testable statement of what the researcher or researchers predict will be the outcome of the study. It is stated at the start of the study. It includes components like variables, population, and the relation between the variables. So we have already said it is a rewording of the research question. So we will see what are the differences between a research question and research hypothesis. Research question. Queries about relationships between variables. So research question is a query or queries about relationships between variables. Research hypothesis is propose solutions or answer to these queries. So research question is in the form of interrogative or interrogative form. Research hypothesis in declarative form as statement. We will see some examples for this. What effect does social media have on people's attitude? When it comes to hypothesis, social media has an effect on people's attitude, or social media influences people's attitude, or can be people's attitude depends on social media, or there is a significant effect for social media on people's attitude. Then how effective are medication in the behavior of children with ADHD? Research hypothesis can be there is a significant difference in the behavior of children with ADHD after medication. Some more examples. What is the effect of music therapy on the subjective well-being of elderly residing in old age homes? These studies are being done. That's why I have taken this as example. Research hypothesis. There is a significant difference in the subjective well-being of elderly before and after music therapy. Then another research question, can flexible work arrangements improve job satisfaction? When it comes to research hypothesis, employees who are flexible working hours will report greater job satisfaction than employees who work fixed hours. So that is all about the differences between the different examples with regard to research question and research hypothesis. Next, we will see What are the functions of hypothesis? In the hypothesis, one important function is the validity of a theory is examined through hypothesis. The validity of a theory is examined through hypothesis. Scientists or investigators or researchers reason from theories to hypotheses and test those theories in the real world. Already we have discussed this in research paradigms. For from theories, hypotheses are derived and these are tested in the real world. So, if hypothesis is derived from a theory, the validity of theory is examined through hypothesis. That is, testing the hypothesis with the help of statistics. Then facilitates observation and experimentation. Aids in the verification of the observations. Helps in steering inquiries in the right direction. Serves as the investigator's starting point. Because in the start itself, the researcher poses the research question and the hypothesis. This will give a direction for the research to the investigator. So it serves as the investigator's starting point and gives the right direction. Provide the reader with an understanding of the researcher's expectations about the study before data collection begins. Hypotheses tend to induce critical thinking and to facilitate understanding and interpretation of the data. So it facilitates critical thinking and understanding and interpretation of the data. Hypothesis guards against superficiality and minimizes the possibility that spurious results will be misinterpreted. Because we are doing, after collecting the data, and on analyzing the data, we are testing the hypothesis and we are checking the tenability of the hypothesis. So it guards against superficiality and minimizes the possibility that spurious results will be misinterpreted. So these are some of the functions of hypothesis or why hypotheses are needed. Next, characteristics and wordings of hypothesis. These are very important because most of the beginning researchers, it is found that the hypotheses are not stated properly. That's why I am taking little pain on these aspects of hypothesis. State expected relationship between the independent variable and dependent variable within the population. So hypothesis state expected relationships between the independent variable and dependent variable within a population. A hypothesis must keep and reflect the scope for further investigations and experiments. So if one thing, in one study, the hypothesis is stated and it is rejected or accepted, based on that, some other researchers or the same researcher can do further investigations. Hypotheses are based on sound, justifiable rationale. It is consistent with an existing body of knowledge because hypothesis is derived from theory, previous experiences, experts' point of view, literature, creative thinking, imagination, so on. It is consistent with an existing body of knowledge. So it is based on an assumption. Assumption means it is refers to a basic principle that is believed to be true without proof or verification. When this assumption is made into hypothesis, the researcher tests the hypothesis so that the hypothesis is verified. Then the wording of hypothesis. Hypothesis should be worded in simple, clear and concise language and provides a definition of the variables in concrete operational terms. Concrete and operational terms. So it should be very clear. It should be very specific. The terms should be very clear. Operational terms means the concepts, theoretical concepts that are very abstract terms, but these concepts or the variables, when the investigator is considering in his study, in his or her study, it has to be operationalized. That is, what is that variable in his or her study? It has to be very clearly defined. That is operational definition. Then agreement with the observed facts. Specific, should be specific, what the variables are, in whom it is studied. The variables has to be operationalized. So operational definition should be given. Should be capable of being tested. If a hypothesis lacks a phrase such as more than, less than, greater than, different from, related to, associated with, it is not amenable to testing in a quantitative study. That means if a hypothesis has to be tested, it has to be compared with or correlated with or associated with, or there should be minimum two variables. Then only the hypothesis is able to, hypothesis can be tested. So it is amenable to test if two variables are there to find out the correlation, association, to find out the effect, something like that. Then what are the sources of hypothesis? Sources of hypothesis. Scientific theory. Scientific theory is an important source of hypothesis based on previous research. So scientific theory, it is good to use scientific theory in hypothesis because it is capable of explaining all the facts related to the investigation. If our hypothesis is based on theory, it is a strength to our study. Then previous research, previous study, previous knowledge and information regarding the topic is extremely helpful to form a concrete hypothesis. Then observations from previous experiments, investigations and recent theories. General paradigm that runs through the research domain of a specific topic. Resemblance and relativity among various research topics. Again, some other sources already mentioned are thinking, imagination, creative thinking, imagination, aids in the formulation of a good hypothesis, personal experience regarding the topic of investigation. If we have exposure to that particular area in the clinical field, if we are doing the study in the clinical area, exposure to that area, previous clinical experience, talking with the experts, expertise can be utilized. Then culture, general pattern that influence the thinking process of people. These are all sources of hypothesis. Then derivation of hypothesis. Hypothesis is derived from two processes, induction and deduction. Already in the previous video, research paradigm, this is dealt in depth with adequate examples, induction and deduction. Anyway, once more I will go through that because these are very important. Inductive hypothesis, that is generalization based on observed relationships. So from specific to general, inductive hypothesis is from specific to general, whereas deductive hypothesis is from general to specific. Researchers observe certain patterns, trends or associations among phenomena and then use the observation as a basis for predictions. Sources for inductive hypothesis, already we discussed the source of hypothesis. Same, related literature, personal experiences, qualitative studies, previous research studies, previous experience, thinking, imagination, expertise of others, all are sources. Patients who are stressed by fear of pain will have more difficulty in deep breathing and coughing after surgery than patients who are not stressed. So, from specific observation, a generalization is made. So, observe a few patients admitted for surgery, observed them, found that they are stressed by fear of pain and they had difficulty in deep breathing and coughing. So then generalize that patients who are stressed by fear of pain will have more difficulty in deep breathing and coughing after surgery than patients who are not stressed. So this is inductive hypothesis, that is generalization based on observed relationships. Next comes deductive hypothesis. Deductive hypotheses have a starting point theories that are applied to particular situations, that is general to specific. So the hypothesis is derived from either a theory or from the researcher's experience or with review of literature, from the review of literature from the previous studies. One small example for a deductive hypothesis: stress has an impact on immune system. This is a general theory or general assumption. Mr. X is stressed, therefore Mr. X has chance to contract infections. So this is deductive hypothesis, general to specific. So this video, this much only I am discussing. So we have discussed what is hypothesis, difference between research question and research hypothesis, functions of hypothesis, characteristics and wording of hypothesis, sources of hypothesis, and derivation of hypothesis. Next video, I am planning to deal with types of hypothesis and testing of hypothesis. Your comments and suggestions are invited. Thank you.